I had read the book in one sitting, actually on the train going home, missed my stop and carried on reading. It was very intelligent and very thought-provoking, and it delves to the heart of the issue. And it had a visceral emotional reaction to it.
In a way, I don't know how I come to the stories that I write. I live with them for a long time, I play with them for a long time, put them together like this and like that, and at one moment I realize, okay, now I have it, now I can write it.
The book was written about 8 or 9 years ago by Bernhard Schlink, and it was his first book, I think I'm right in saying. He's a lawyer, and he wrote this book, which was an enormous international bestseller. And Anthony Minghella bought the rights almost, I think, before the book was published. And when I read it, I immediately wanted to write the screenplay.
Anthony Minghella, my producer, had always wanted to make the film himself, write and direct it. And I've known Anthony for years, and Sidney Pollack is a producing partner, and they have a company in London called Mirage. And they were going to make it. And I've been badgering Anthony for years, saying, oh, you know, you'll never get round to it, let me do it.
I said to him, it's essentially a small film and you're much more interested now in making big films. Why don't you just give it to me and I'll write it and you can produce it and, you know, I'll do all the work and you'll get all the glory. And Anthony said, no, I really am going to write it, I'm going to do it myself.
And in the end, Anthony relented. He said, no, you're right, I won't get round to it for a few more years.
It was 8 years. And said, you're right, I'm never going to write The Reader. You can do it if you promise to get it made next year. Because we've been meaning to make it for so long and we never, you know, Anthony had never got round to writing the screenplay.
Mr. Schlink was getting worried that his story might not be put onto celluloid, and in the end, Anthony said, well, if you do it as your next project, I'll produce.
So I was finally allowed to write the screenplay I'd wanted to write 8 years ago.
We went to Berlin really for 2 years, and we got together a fantastic German crew and a fantastic body of German actors.
She was great, wasn't she?
There are only 2 English actors in the film, Ray Fiennes and Kate.
Kate Winslet's an actress who just gets better and better and better and seems to inhabit the screen with an incredible authority now. And I think people have been finding deeper and deeper colours in her recent work. There's a density there which is like the work of the greatest screen actresses.
I feel unbelievably lucky, really, to have Kate, not just in the film, but also in my life. She's an astonishing actress, but a great collaborator, a great supporter, not just to myself, but to the other actors, and I think gives an amazing performance.
Kate Winslet was always my first choice. And I think she can be very tender and almost insecure, and then again, she can be so strong. But what I like most is this, she's a very sensuous and, in a way, earthy woman. And that's exactly what Hannah is.
I had read the book about, I'm trying to think, about 5 years ago. And I'm a relatively slow reader. I just am, I don't know why. And I read it in a day. And at the time, I guess I was maybe 27, and I thought, oh, you know, I wish I was a little bit older. What a wonderful part. And then about a year ago, Stephen got in touch and wanted to sit down and talk to me about it. And I really couldn't believe it. I thought, seriously, for Hannah Schmidt? Wow, my God, aren't I too young? And so we sat down and started talking, and I realized that, that maybe I could do it. Hannah, at the beginning of the story, she's 32, and then she ages kind of incrementally throughout, all the way up until she's about 68. I've never had prosthetics before or anything like that, and so it's an extra dimension to my job that I've never experienced before now, and you know, and that's the great thing about acting, is that you do get to have these new and different experiences, and wow, it's really great.
It happened so fast. It was snowing, the bombs, the flames. There were flames all over the village. Then the screaming began and got worse and worse. We were responsible for them.
It's such a special part. It has been really eye-opening. You know, I've learned so much. I've learned so much more as an actress, and I've learned a lot more about myself as a person. It's been creatively some of the most valuable experiences of my entire life.
Rafe Fiennes, I can't imagine anyone else who is so expressive of an inner life of somebody who is intelligent, serious, thoughtful, profound, and sensual, which the hero has to be. I think with Rafe it was, pretty much a given.
I never thought of anybody else. When David Hare and I were talking about adapting it, I think we both of us knew Rafe very well and just immediately went, well, this is Rafe's part.
You're Michael Berg?
Yes. The story is relatively simple, but the questions it asks about blame, judgment, guilt, love, sexuality is all quite complicated.
Hannah has been in prison for over 20 years. You're her only contact. And I'm told you don't visit her.
No, I don't. So he has a crisis of conscience. What does he really think about her? Why does he not see her? How do you condemn someone you've been intimate with and that intimacy still is something you hold close to you? He's an intelligent man who's come to realise that human beings are, have many different layers and faces. Particularly him.
He's so brilliant and so immersed, actually, really immersed in the character and wanting to do absolutely what's right for the character and yet at the same time be willing to try something different.
At face value, David Cross and I don't look like each other, but I understand that we have similar qualities as actors. I can see why Stephen has put us together. I think he's got a great quality anyway, different to mine, whatever that is, but I think as a young actor he's beautifully pitched.
When Stephen first came to Germany and said, do you think there's a German boy who can play this part? The casting director said, yes, there's one. She said, I'll introduce you to a whole lot of others and you can choose, but there's only one. And Stephen auditioned 10 boys one day. And he said, well, the one I like is David Cross. And she said, yep, that's the one who can play it.
Actually, it was the first movie where I really learned about preparation and how to prepare a role. I spent a lot of time with Stephen and read a lot of books as well.
David went on an incredibly difficult journey, mostly to do with learning English well enough, because his English was not good to start. He did an enormous amount of research, because I always do, and I always think the actors should as well.
We went to the Jewish Museum in Berlin and went to the bookshop there, and Stephen made a huge shopping with 5 bags of books, and I had to read them. I thought that was a very, very big, huge challenge for me.
And then David blossomed, really, throughout the whole shoot. He blossomed into a leading actor, and that's what he is. He's an astonishing young man of incredible variety of gifts to do with sensitivity and openness and warmth and generosity, fierce intelligence, and an emotional life which is rich and runs very deep. So for me, it was a gift from the gods, as the director goes.
You didn't want to know me. You could see I was in the first carriage. So why did you sit in the second?
What did you think I was doing? Why the hell did you think I was there?
How should I know?
David, he's actually remarkably similar to his character, Michael. He's incredibly professional, really beats himself up if he doesn't think he's got something that he wanted to do or didn't feel like he'd tried something that he was planning to try. And he's very sort of sensitive little soul.
Have you spoken to her? Of course not.
He's just so perfect for this part.
Why, of course not. I can't. I can't do that.
We spent an awful lot of time casting, and we got together a fantastic body of German actors, all of who knew the book, because the book is one of the great school books, textbooks, and everybody knows it in Germany. And so I found the German cast incredibly helpful, wise, useful, and supportive in the examination of the story and the telling of it, and ways to look at it and re-look at it. And I am thrilled that the company is led by the giants of the German stage and screen, such as Bruno Ganz, who's a living legend in his own country and indeed everywhere, I think.
What we feel isn't important. It's utterly unimportant. The only question is what we do.
At first we could only hear the fire. It was in the steeple. Then we could see burning beams. And they began to crash to the floor.
And then we had Lena Erling, who's of course a wonderful actress.
When I read the script and the mother's When she testified in the trial, I was so moved by that. And I was like, can't I play the woman who wrote the book and her mother? And Stephen was intrigued, and we started doing makeup tests, and everyone decided that he could. I remember the last shot, and this was late in the day. We had worked all day, and it was time to go home, basically. But Stephen really wanted that shot of my character turning her back with her cardigan, just walking out of the room. And it was important that she was not going to be defined and consumed by being a victim, you know, so she has moved on.
Cut. That works great, huh? It works great.
It's great.
When Anthony Minghella decided that he had too many other commitments, we talked about Stephen as a wonderful director.
If you can, David, that would be perfect.
I had seen The Hours and loved how these different levels were kind of worked together. I think Stephen is a wonderful choice.
With Stephen and I, it's almost as though we're from the same tribe. It's just a great collaborative relationship. I'm just loving every single second of it. I really am. He's like a sort of a child. He kind of reminds me of, he's like the boy in Cat in the Hat. And he looks a bit like Tintin. And he has this just unstoppable energy and such a profound love for the story. And not only that, but very, very clear idea of how he wants for the story to be told. And is very happy for everybody to be involved in that, you know, sharing ideas and just trying to come up with what's best for the story, what's best for this scene.
I think because he comes from the theater, he involves everybody in the process, and that's genuinely exciting.
With Stephen, it's collaboration or nothing.
In an ideal world.
For everybody. Stephen won't work with people who are not committed to collaboration. In that sense, it's much more like working in the theatre than it is in film. There's no sense of freelance. There's no sense of somebody joining for a day and just doing their bit and, you know, going away.
It's great. You don't know what to say.
You're all, sometimes exhaustingly, but also sometimes exhilaratingly, working together.
I don't think I ever choose material to make into a film because I think you can make a film. I just choose material that I'd like to be with for a long period of time. And obviously in making a film, you're with the material for a long period. So you have to make sure it's something that you really do love and want to explore and can keep exploring and keep relating to.
It's being shot really well and clearly, and I never feel he's imposing anything, just always asking questions. We have this big debate about judging, you know, condemning someone for what you know they've done, even if it's horrific. I mean, basically keeping the questions in focus, so it makes me feel I can trust Stephen.
Every single thing that is in the film is meant to be there, and it's operating at every level, metaphorical, dramatic, narrative, character. Everything is worked so that you have an achieved work of art. I mean, it's been a very strange film because of the experience of losing 2 out of the 3 producers. Anthony Minghella wasn't just a filmmaker himself, but he had formed a company with Sydney Pollack called Mirage, which existed to help younger British filmmakers and help them get their films made. And so Anthony died very suddenly and very shockingly.
Literally in the middle of filming, I got a phone call saying Anthony had passed away the night before. And it was terrible. Terrible. Still feels terrible. And then, of course, a few months later, Sydney died.
Sydney, we knew had been ill before we even started making the film. And so, basically all the time, Stephen and I are both thinking about the things that Anthony and Sydney said about the project and about the particular problems they pointed to and how we should deal with them, and whether often Stephen and I discuss, but would Anthony and Sydney be happy that we're doing this? And obviously our ambition with the film is to make a film that these 2 men would have liked.
I think what makes it interesting to have a book made into a movie is it's another piece of art. It plays with the same issues, the same characters, does something similar but still different. You, in a way, encounter what you have written in a completely new and different way.
The book is examining the second generation after Nazi Germany and the guilt suffered by that entire country and its people for what the country had just gone through. And one of the reasons that the boy is so much younger than Hannah Schmitz is principally to show the different generations. I mean, she is Nazi Germany and he is the second generation.
Look after yourself.
It's about the question of how do you live in the shadow of one of the greatest crimes in human history, from the point of view of the impact of the Nazis, not on their victims, but on themselves.
As a child, you grow up and you are loved by your parents. As a child, you are helped and enabled by your teachers, given spiritual guidance by your pastors. What happens when you get to a certain age and you realize that there is no moral certainty because your teachers, your pastors, your parents were involved, whether actively or even as passive bystanders, in genocide? Does that invalidate your love? Does it mean your love is then dirty? How is it possible to love anyone given the circumstances of what that country perpetrated?
Societies think they operate by morality, but they don't. They operate by something called law.
The Bruno Ganz character is saying, what is the judgment here? What is right? What is wrong? He throws back at the students these questions, which I think the film is asking all of us. How do you judge someone? Was she right? She was doing her job, wasn't she? So it throws back at us this question of individual choice and how we judge people.
What's so impossible to understand is that it was regular people that did this. It was thousands and thousands of people, some sick monsters, obviously, but it was regular people committing these crimes that you and I could never imagine.
I think pretty much each member of my generation has an experience of this kind. So the teacher who taught me English, whom I truly liked a lot because he was a wonderful teacher and I owe him my love for the English language. And then after his retirement, it came out that he was involved in something truly bad. And we went to law school, and when I started going to law school, there was what was called the poison closet, where the literature that our professors had written between 33 and 45 was locked away. So we couldn't get it, we couldn't read it. And at one point, we protested around 68, and we got access and started reading what they had written. Professors whom we, again, owed a lot, liked a lot. So this conflict, what happens to you when you love someone who is involved, entangled, has been engaged in something awful? In a way, it entangles you yourself into this guilt if you keep loving them.
Schmitz? You have a visitor.
The problem of The Reader, which is a common problem with adapting novels for movies, is that it's a first-person narrative. And so, you're privy in a novel to the narrator's thoughts. So you've always got that problem of how do you invent events which express what the character is thinking without doing a dreary old voiceover of him dirging on about what he's thinking and feeling.
Well, David Hare is an old friend of mine. We've worked together in the theatre as well as on the Hours.
That's exactly my point.
It's a fantastically robust, honest, vivacious relationship, both in the writing process and indeed on set. David will be a part of the process really from the very start of writing to the very finish of editing. And it's the way I prefer to work with writers, mostly I think because of my experience in the theatre, where writers tend to be core collaborators.
I'm primarily a playwright, and so I only work in the cinema when I'm interested to work in the cinema. And I've felt for many years that non-genre work is the only interesting work. This is most certainly not what is called a Holocaust picture. And because it concerns events that happened during the war, but is largely set in the 50s, the 60s, the 80s, and the 90s, it's an unclassifiable picture. And they're the ones that excite me. They're the ones that interest me to write.
What's fantastic is David, of course, is a wonderful writer, but he's also made films as a director, as well as directed for the stage. And I use David as a sounding board on everything, not just the writing, but the whole emotional landscape of them, even down to detail of props. I've always found David to be one of the key intellectual guardians of the story, but also one of the key emotional guardians of the story as well.
You're good at it, aren't you?
Good at what? The mark of a good screenplay is often that it seems simple,
Reading.
but actually they contain huge things.
What's funny?
And that's, I think, the beauty of this screenplay.
I didn't think I was good at anything.
The undercurrents, the subtext is really, shaking. It's really vibrating.
What are you asking for? Forgiveness for her? Or do you just want to feel better yourself?
The business of trying to explore and understand Nazi crimes is it's a dangerous and volatile business, because you can unintentionally cross a line that you don't wish to cross. And I would say what we discussed with Bernard more than anything was our sense of responsibility to the victims of the Nazi crimes and how we honored that sense of responsibility.
What are you doing?
I'm writing a poem about you.
The story deliberately is not generous in asking us to understand Hannah. We ask to understand Michael's journey, trying to understand Hannah.
It hesitates to signal any easy judgment about anyone in it. A judgment of Hannah, of Michael. In the end, it's a very humane piece.
It doesn't answer any questions, and it doesn't ask you as an audience to forgive the actions of anybody. And whilst I couldn't hope for an audience to sympathise with Hannah Schmitz, I liked the idea that audiences may feel morally compromised and uncomfortable if they did feel any level of sympathy for someone who had committed horrific war crimes. I mean, that's an extraordinary thing to have an audience experience. And so if a little bit of that happens, I think it makes it all the more interesting.
I mean, people need to interpret the movie in their own way, and I hope people do. I think it's a very complicated story. My version of it might not be other people's version of it.
Who was she?
Well, that's what I wanted to tell you. That's why we're here.
But of course, it isn't the telling. In the telling is the release, and the telling is the importance, and in the telling is the understanding.